In the pages of history, it is rare to see someone so universally respected and praised by friend and foe alike. That figure was Pierre Terrail Seigneur De Bayard, and his virtues were held as a shining example of what it meant to be a knight. The historical account of Bayard gave birth to the legend of a knight without fear and without reproach. To his contemporaries, he was the faultless knight, heroic, devout, generous, and kind. As a military commander, he was even just and fair to his enemies, forbidding his men from pillaging and plundering conquered cities. He always made sure to pay for something he might have taken in times of war, rarely accepting gifts or taking supplies for free. On the battlefield, his courage had no limits, as he would run headfirst into actions that seemed insurmountable, many times even by himself. His enthusiasm and devotion inspired his men to follow him into the most deadly peril, and his heroism sunk the morale of his enemies. His mere name was a tower of strength to his comrades, and an omen of disaster to his foes. It all began when Pierre was born into a family of nobles in Pont-Chahat, France, around the year 1475. At the age of 11, he joined the royal court of the young Duke of Savoy, Charles I, as a page. Pierre stayed at the court until Charles died suddenly at the age of 21 in 1490, rumored to have been poisoned during dinner by a rival. He left to study arms in Turin, Italy, but then returned to finish his military studies at the French court. In 1493, Pierre became a man-at-arms in the company of the Count of Ligny. He soon proved himself as a skilled horseman and soldier, even at his young age. When stationed as a soldier in northern France, he participated in and won top honors at a local jousting tournament. Pierre's renowned generosity was shown even then, by him giving his hard-fought prizes to his friends and rivals. If a companion lost a horse, he would replace it, and he never refused requests by others if he could possibly grant it. He first proved his worth in combat when he accompanied King Charles VIII of France into Italy during the Italian Wars that began in 1494. In a massive thunderstorm at the Battle of Fornovo in 1495, he distinguished himself while charging against the enemy while in the service of the Count of Ligny. Despite having 2 horses killed underneath him, he continued fighting on foot, and in the thick of brutal combat, he captured the standard of the horsemen opposing him and draped himself with it. Pierre was knighted after the battle for his heroic actions. Even though the French won the battle, their forces were temporarily expelled from the Italian peninsula. The French army returned in 1498 to northern Italy to conquer Milan, but lost it soon afterwards when the local French garrison was overwhelmed and driven from the city by an army of a returning Italian duke. The French sent another army to conquer it back, with Bayard among them. Camped 20 miles from Milan, and on an expedition to steal horses, Bayard and about 40 to 50 men were ambushed by hundreds of the enemy, who learned of the attempt by local spies. Through his courageous leadership, the enemy forces were pushed back to the gates of Milan, with Bayard ending up in the city by himself when he became separated from the rest of his men. He chased them all the way to the palace of the lord of the city, but was soon taken prisoner when surrounded by enemy forces. The lord was so impressed with his courage and gallantry that he released Bayard without ransom. In 1503, Bayard was celebrated as a hero when he led a small force of French troops against a similar number of Spaniards in a fight of honor when he was stationed at a garrison in southeast Italy. The entire Spanish force was killed or captured, and among the prisoners was Captain Don Alonso, whom Bayard treated with the utmost respect and kindness. Alonso eventually escaped instead of waiting for his ransom to be paid, and soon spread lies about his supposed ill treatment to his companions. To avenge his honor, Bayard challenged Don Alonso to mortal combat when he refused to recant his lies about his treatment. Even though he was weakened by sickness, he defeated and killed Don Alonso in a duel 2 miles outside the Spanish garrison. Bayard's fame quickly spread throughout Europe, as his ability as a horseman as well as a foot soldier became renowned. Another celebrated combat soon afterwards between 13 French and 13 Spanish mounted knights again elevated Bayard's prestige throughout the land. One of the rules of the planned contest was when a knight was dismounted, he could no longer participate throughout the rest of the fight. When it began, the Spanish used trickery and killed 11 of the French knights' horses, leaving only Bayard and one other to fight off 13 Spanish knights. The two French knights managed to hold off the Spanish by using the horses' bodies as a shield, and by nightfall, they still stood unbeaten against all odds. The entire honor of the fight was given to Bayard and the French, and he returned to the French camp as a hero. One of Bayard's most incredible feats of his career took place at the Battle of Garigliano later that year in December 1503. Once again, the French forces faced off against the Spanish south of Rome at the Garigliano River. There was a bridge that the French held, in which the Spanish desperately wanted and conceived a plan to take it. The Spanish deceptively drew most of the French forces away in a feigned attack elsewhere along the river, leaving the bridge unprotected. 200 Spanish knights raced towards the bridge, but Bayard saw them at the last moment and rushed by himself to guard against the attack. He sent his companion to race for assistance, but for now he was on his own. He rushed in like a thunderbolt, pushing the first group of enemy knights back, sending many of them over the bridge into the water. He came to stand at the narrow entrance of the bridge, and was described fighting like a demon or an uncaged lion against 200 Spanish for half an hour until help arrived. He successfully held the bridge, and the French drove the Spanish over a mile away, but they retreated soon afterwards against the superior Spanish forces, with Bayard temporarily taken prisoner. French reinforcements arrived, and Bayard and his men were able to escape back over the bridge into French territory. However, the Spanish were able to drive the French out of the Kingdom of Naples. Upon hearing Bayard's exploits at the Battle of Garigliano, Pope Julius II unsuccessfully attempted to draft him in the papal service. In the coming years, Bayard's reputation on the field of battle only grew. Against rebellious Genoa in 1508, Bayard climbed up a mountain nearby with a small crack force of troops to capture an enemy fort guarding the city. After a successful assault that completely surprised the enemy, the Genoese fled and soon surrendered the city. For the next 5 years, Bayard distinguished himself through numerous battles in the Italian wars, often leading assaults from the front and suffering serious injuries. However, in 1513 at the Battle of the Spurs in France, the invading Henry VIII defeated the French army. Unwilling to surrender, Bayard quickly rode up to and captured a resting English officer. He then surprised the officer by next giving himself up to his own prisoner. He was then taken to the English camp where he met Henry VIII, whom released him without ransom, impressed with his gallantry and honor. In 1515, at the Battle of Marignano, Bayard and the French decisively defeated the army of the Swiss Confederacy. After the battle, the young French king Francis I requested to be knighted by Bayard. In what others saw as a hopeless endeavor, Bayard heroically defended the French city of Mézières in 1521. He only had 1,000 men to guard against an army of 35,000 from invading forces of the Holy Roman Empire. The defenders put up stubborn resistance for 6 weeks to give the French king time to arrive with the relief army. The siege was finally lifted, and the defense of Mézières saved France from invasion of the entire country. Bayard was declared the savior of France, and the king bestowed upon him the Knight of the famous Order of St. Michael. He was back in Italy against the Spanish in 1524, where his luck finally ran out when he was guarding the retreat of the French army against enemy pursuers. After driving back an advancing company of arquebusiers, Bayard was soon struck with a bullet, mortally wounding him. He requested his loyal steward rest him against the tree, facing the enemy, as he never wanted to turn his back to his foes. He died soon afterwards, and his friends and enemies alike were filled with grief. To his contemporaries, Bayard represented the most perfect knight in the world, as his pattern of chivalry was what every man sought to imitate.